So today we're going to talk about a number of things before we dive into Linux. First of all, we'll talk about automation and why automation is really a critical practice in a modern IT organization. And it's a critical practice that organizations who are following a DevOps methodology will utilize. We'll look at how shell scripting is a very common way that organizations automate processes within their environment. Then we'll end the lecture looking at fundamental Linux capabilities. We'll look at how you can sort of navigate in a Linux based file system and how you run commands and services. We'll wrap things up talking a little bit about package management and how you can actually install software packages on a Linux system. Okay, let's dive right in. Automation, as I mentioned, is a really critical practice that you'll find in a modern IT organization. There's a couple different examples of automation that you might find in an organization that's following DevOps methodologies. You'll see organizations building software build pipelines. And within a software build pipeline, a developer commits code to a software repository. Those code changes are committed to a version control system. Then a continuous integration server will automatically pick up those changes that were made to the repository and perform some sort of software build, unit testing, integration testing, possibly end-to-end testing, and ultimately the software pipeline will produce some sort of build artifacts. And these build artifacts may be deployed to production systems. We'll learn later on this semester how to build a software build pipeline using the Jenkins CI/CD system. This is just a very common application of automation within a modern IT organization. Well, so why do we automate things? Well, there's a number of reasons that we might choose to automate our processes. We might automate our processes in order to scale the work that we want to perform in our environment. Automation allows one person to perform the work of many because I can have somebody who triggers a script or somebody who creates a software script that automates and performs a task. And now I can run that task dozens, hundreds, even thousands of times without having to go and hire more people. And because I'm automating that task, I'm generally writing some sort of code to perform that task. That improves the repeatability of the process. It improves the accuracy of the process. If I gave 10 people a written process to perform and asked all 10 people to follow this detailed process, I guarantee that not all 10 people would return with the same exact result. I would have, one or two people that they would make a mistake, they would type some information in incorrectly, or they would misunderstand the instructions. The bottom line is that if you're asking people to manually perform some set of task, a workflow, a runbook task, that's not repeatable because humans are fallible. Humans make mistakes. Whereas if I have a process that's been automated, then I can run that process over and over and over again and achieve the same result. I automate tasks to save time. If we have a system that is running a software process that's automating some sort of task, the system's going to be able to perform that task much faster than a human being who has to like type in information and data manually. And ultimately this allows us to make processes safer. If a process is automated, there's less opportunity for someone to make a mistake, someone to enter in incorrect data, and it's just a much safer way to execute processes within our IT organization. And then finally, we might use automation to empower our users. You can imagine a situation where you build some sort of self-service portal within your company, and this portal allows individuals to execute processes, to run reports or batch jobs. They don't have to send an email or call somebody up in the IT organization because these processes have been automated. So it's a very empowering. Uh, it's a way to empower people within your organization. Well, so now that we understand a little bit why automation is beneficial, how do we go about automating things in our organization? What's sort of the philosophical approach we ought to take? Well, it turns out there's a couple different approaches you can take to automation in your organization. The first approach is to follow what we call the leftover principle, which in a nutshell basically says, let's try to automate everything that we possibly can. Now, the reality is that there are going to be tasks that are incredibly complex, or tasks that are run very infrequently. These are the sorts of tasks that we might not choose to automate, at least not right away. But in many cases, there are tasks that we run very frequently, or tasks that are relatively simple to automate. And so we would try to start there, try to start with those tasks that we run very frequently, that are very simple to automate. But our end goal is to try to automate everything that we possibly can within our organization. The second approach to automation is what we call the compensatory principle. And the compensatory principle basically says that, you know what, people aren't these sort of infinitely versatile machines. People are human beings, and there are certain things that machines do better than people, and vice versa. For example, a machine is better at polling a remote server to get its status and statistics every 5 minutes in order to generate some sort of performance metrics. If you asked a person to poll a machine every 5 minutes, maybe they could do it for a few hours, but eventually you'd probably drive that person crazy. They would have to sleep at some point, right? So people just aren't wired like machines in terms of the, being able to do these very repeatable tasks. So let's automate the things that machines are really good at. Let's focus on automating those things first. That's what the compensatory principle is all about. And then finally, we have the complementarity principle. And this one's a little bit tricky to understand. So what the complementarity principle is saying is that there's sort of like this risk associated with automating everything. If you automate everything in your organization, then over time, the people in your organization won't remember how things work anymore. They won't remember how the system works. It's this notion that you're sort of de-skilling or you're sort of removing skills from the organization because people don't have to do any work anymore. Everything's been automated. The complementary principle suggests that you really need to sort of strike a balance between the things that you automate and the things that encourage your employees to learn and to grow their own skills. So now these principles, automation principles, aren't mutually exclusive. All of these could apply to any sort of situation, but sort of philosophically, this is how we might approach automation within our organization. One thing I'll note is that there's a difference between building tools and creating automation. And this is a distinction that I see companies they oftentimes companies are really confused about the distinction between building tools and building automation. If I create some sort of software script and that software script allows me to perform the same set of tasks as some sort of manual task that I was previously performing, we're building a tool. And how do I know that we're building a tool? Well, we're building a tool if we have to manually execute that task. So previously we were performing this manual task and we were running this set of commands, but now we've created this tool that runs the same set of commands. But in order to run this tool, I have to sort of manually trigger the execution of the tool. That's tool building. When we're building automation, we're really eliminating the need for somebody to run a manual task. We're eliminating the need for somebody to manually execute a script or run some sort of tool. So that's the real distinction. If somebody is still involved, if a person is still involved in manually using a tool or running a script to perform a task, that task is not automated yet. If you remove the human being from the loop and that task is automatically triggered based upon a based upon a set of requirements being met in that particular environment, then that suggests that task has now been automated. And our goal, if you remember the leftover principle, our goal is really to try to automate everything that we possibly can in the environment. So oftentimes our manual processes start out as tools. We build a bunch of tools. Then once we've built the tools and we've been manually exercising those tools for a while, then we'll take the next step to automating those tools within our environment. So in your IT organization, one of the questions I'm oftentimes asked is, how much of my team's time should be spent on automating things? One of the biggest problems in most IT organizations is that the engineers spend a lot of their time, maybe most of their time, fighting fires. They're trying to solve problems and fix things that have been broken, and they're trying to support the organization's the internal staff members. They're trying to support customers. In a high performing IT organization, the majority of the team's time should be spent on automating stuff. So taking these manual tasks, building tools, and then taking those tools and creating automation around them. And when these teams focus their time on automation, what they should be trying to identify within their environment are the bottlenecks. are the constraints in each one of their processes. And we'll talk a bit about the theory of constraints later on in the course and how that's a theory that plays a big role in lean methodology and in DevOps methodologies. But if you're going to automate a process, the first thing you got to do is figure out, well, what's the bottleneck? What's the constraint in the process? Identify and fix that constraint first. And then one of the other mistakes I see that organizations make is that the CIO or some senior leader says, "Hey, we got to automate everything," and the organization embarks on this big project to try to automate everything they possibly can. It's sort of like the Big Bang approach to automation. And oftentimes that doesn't work very well. The key to automating processes in your organization is to start small and make it an incremental effort. So you start by automating part of a process or creating some sort of tool. And then you learn from that. You learn from that work and you take the feedback from that work, and then you plan another increment, another iteration. It's very similar uh, to to developing software iteratively, where we build sort of a minimum viable product, and then we take the learnings from releasing that product or getting in the hands of our customers, that feedback, and we incorporate that into the next iteration of work. We want to take the same sort of approach to automating our processes within our environment. How do we automate stuff? Well, thankfully there's lots of different ways that we can automate our IT processes. Today we'll look at shell scripts, which use scripting languages. There's a whole host of other tools that we can use. There's configuration management, there's continuous integration systems, there's infrastructure definition tools. We'll be playing with all of these different technologies throughout this course.